let's go from one great guest to another great guest, the man himself, Mark Sleboda, International Relations Security Analyst. How you doing, Mark? You doing okay today?
Jamaro, thanks for having me. It's always an honor and a pleasure to be on the show, and I'm alive.
Mark,
How are you?
I am okay. It is an honor and a pleasure to have you. Um, I want to start with, and I guess I want to ask this because there are three main stories I guess I want to hit. The first has to do with, I want to get the guy's name right, Colonel Ivan Voronich, who was whacked recently. And I want to show this video because I want to get your take on this. Is this, Alexander McCarris is making the argument that this is a new policy from the standpoint of Russia, meaning they have decided that they are now going to hunt down people who hunt down civilians and murder those civilians. This is the assassination, apparently. Let's see, I don't have any context for this video. It's 30 seconds. Well, trigger warning for those who are squeamish about a horrible person getting whacked. All right. So apparently he is getting whacked in a little bubble, and you can see that woman running. Get out of Dodge. I'm not laughing at the woman. I'm sorry. I think it's good sense to get out of Dodge when somebody gets killed. And there's a person, and you can see running with a gun. All right. Did Russia kill this person? And is this a new strategy or policy with this regard? Like, meaning, are they hunting down people who are, let's say, in the spy sector going forward?
Okay, so first of all, let me say that we don't know absolutely for sure, right? There are generally speaking two likely possibilities. The first one is that this is a result of political infighting within the regime, even within the different intelligence services, or even within the SBU. It's certainly possible. The Economist actually did a fairly good piece just last week, which I also covered in one of my weekend review, about how the knives are out in Kiev, right? The Yermak Zelensky duo is attempting to consolidate power. Political power, and one of the targets of that is Budanov, the military intelligence chief. Kirill, I like the dark Budanov, the psychopath who doesn't like to appear in the light. That is a distinct possibility. However, the other possibility is that this was a Russian assassination, actually a counter assassination, more particularly, because this particular SBU colonel, the SBU is the Kiev regime's main intelligence and counterintelligence intelligence agency, kind of like the FBI and the CIA rolled together. Very large, very powerful, and they have, of course, been behind a large number of assassinations, hundreds of assassinations since the West-backed Maidan Putsch seized power in 2014. And according to the CIA's open bragging about it in the New York Times, the CIA came in and took over the Kiev regime's intelligence agencies and rebuilt them from scratch in their own image. And we can see the results of that quite clearly. The Kiev regime has been waging a war of assassinations and terrorism, in particular in the Donbass and Kherson and Zaporozhye, right? In the Donbass since 2014, in Kherson and Zaporozhye since 2022, and in the last couple of years within Russia as well. And assassinations, often with car bombings and the like, which then bring it over into a terrorist act. and also when it targets, clear civilians. But they have assassinated hundreds of political leaders, activists, journalists. In Russia, they killed Daria Dugina, the
Yes, they did.
daughter of Alexander Dugin, who was a civilian, a young philosopher and journalism student who happened to have a political opinion against the regime in Kiev, right, as her father did, and I knew Daria, right, I considered her a friend, so that was a terrible crime of this regime. But we also saw Vladen Tatarsky, right? He once served within the militias in Donbass. He's from East Ukraine, and he was killed also in a bombing after he had become retired from fighting and become a war correspondent, right? And analyst of the conflict. And he was killed at a public meeting with a bomb. We've seen the assassination of several Russian generals and top military officials. All untold, I mean, particularly in East Ukraine, the number is in the hundreds, right? Politicians, officials, activists, militia commanders. In particular, it is believed that this Ivan Voronich, the special operations alpha group that he headed up, was responsible for the assassinations of the two quite famed Donbass militia leaders from the beginning of the uprising against the new Kiev Putsch, Givy and Motorola, by their call signs. He was also involved in the Kursk operation, which included the sometimes systematic killing of Russian civilians, during the Kiev regime's invasion of Kursk. So he was probably high on their hit list. And it seems that, yes, it is possible that this is, I think even likely, I would say, a change in Russian policy to a counter-escalation. Which many people in Russia, many people within the military, I'm certain the intelligence services and generally have long been waiting for, right? With these hundreds of assassinations, right, over the years, why has there been no, Russia taking a moral high ground, right, in the conflict, which has availed it nothing, because the Western media and governments just cheer on the assassinations, right? I mean, there has never been any condemnation of them. At most, they talk about them in neutral terms. Quite often, it's spoken of in approving terms, and the Western governments themselves just completely ignore them. So what does it gain Russia to take a moral high ground when their people, right, the people of the Donbass, the officials, right, in the areas under Russian control, when their own military commanders, when their own civilians, right, who are outspoken in support of the special military operation, are assassinated, quite often, again, in destructive terrorist bombings and means. So it seems that after the launch of two events, really, I would say that they began serious questioning a few months ago when the head of Russia's chemical, biological, and nuclear defense forces was assassinated in Moscow. And he was assassinated with right outside the front door of his building, a bomb placed in a scooter, which was just left beside the building, which was, quite frankly, a terrible security lapse in the man's personal security. But, you can't protect, in a country with as many people as Russia, you can't protect everyone everywhere all the time, which is, what leads to the success of things like this. But also then what maybe drove it home was Operation Spiderweb, this launching of the drone attacks within Russia that was under the control of the Ukrainian intelligence that targeted Russia's nuclear triad, their strategic deterrence, their nuclear capable bombers, the Tu-95s, Tupolev 95s. And that actually, it has to be said, that occurred at the same time that there was a terrorist attack on a train in the Belgorod region, specifically blowing up a bridge. Okay, that's military, right? That's legitimate. Blowing up a bridge timed when there's a civilian passenger train going overhead. That is not a legitimate military target. That is an act of political terror. And those two things that happened on the same day, right, within the same 24-hour span. So that appears to have really finally been the straw that broke the camel's back. And the chatter is that the Russian government then made the internal decision, which involved they can't just say we're going to start assassinations, right? It counter assassinations, because whatever people may think of it from the outside, the Russian government is a very legalistic regime. Now, supposedly this involves going to a secret court, and yes, secret court. Okay, but there are secret courts in the United States for such matters as well. And asking permission, to target certain people because this assassination war has been waged against them, and this war of I've been talking about this for more than a year.
They really have to do that. I'm sorry, Mike. I have to interrupt.
They really, yes, they
because
really
we don't do that. The president just makes the kill list.
Okay, well, Trump, yeah, I mean,
Obama too. Obama had a kill list.
Yeah, Obama had a kill list. Yeah, Putin does not have a kill list. And yes, if Russia is even in the midst of a special military operation, an intervention in Ukraine, when they're going after intelligence, military, political heads, yes, they need to get permission, internal legalistic permission to go through this, right? Now, there's been a lot of talk about changing the designation of the special military operation to a counter-terror operation. Which, again, means nothing to a Western audience, but it means a lot legally in Russia towards what they can do and can't do. It really is a very big, and they have not made that final decision yet. But I think that they've made, shall we say, a partial step in that direction.
Okay.
And now it appears that this is the Kiev regime. David Ignatius in the Washington Post talked about this a few weeks ago, that Ukraine's dirty war against Russia is just beginning, right? Well, actually, it's been going on since 2014, but it's kicking into higher gear as they are losing worse and more, inevitably, with Pentagon officials calling the Russian offensives, lava flows, right? I.e., inevitable, inexorable. Right, what they can do is asymmetric warfare, unconventional warfare, terrorism, assassinations, and that all of this would increase in frequency and severity, right, and brutality quite often. And now Russia evidently has said enough is enough, and we're going to respond, which makes it a dual dirty war, right? This is something new. If the Russian government, as I believe and many others believe, has indeed embarked down this path, there's going to be off the battlefield an internecine bloodbath between the regimes in Kiev and the Russian government. Right now, all the masks are off, the kid gloves are off, and I don't again know exactly what type of officials the Russian military or intelligence services can now target. but certainly the heads of the SBU. There was also just about a week before that, there was another high-ranking official within the Kiev regime's conscription office, assassinated by a car bomb. And we don't know whether that was Russian intelligence, whether that was local resistance, which certainly does exist in Odessa. They've long been blowing up, tossing Molotov cocktails on these conscription vans that they use to abduct people off the street and drag them off to the front. So, I mean, there's long been low-grade action. So we don't know that it is a possible another data point pointing in this direction, but we don't know for sure yet. Now, the Kiev regime is definitely saying that this was a assassination by people acting on behest of Russia. Supposedly, there was a man-woman team, and from, again, this is only from Ukrainian sources, so take it with a grain of salt. But supposedly, at least one of them was of Azerbaijani ethnic descent, which doesn't really mean anything in the former Soviet space. It doesn't mean any necessary connection to Azerbaijan, which is having its own geopolitical tensions with Russia right now. But it seems likely that they were probably contract killers, which is something that the Kiev regime itself has used, in their assassinations. They don't just use their own agents; they blackmail and bribe people, and they hire people. And this is a dirty war, and it's going to get dirtier and bloodier. And ultimately, of course, we know that the Kiev regime's ultimate target is Putin. They've spoken about it many times. Zelensky brought it up again the last week that they don't believe this war will end until Putin is gone. And they've been quite open. The Kiev regime's military intelligence chief, Krylo, I like the dark Budanov, has said that they've made several assassination attempts against Putin, just none of them have succeeded. And all I say is, if nothing is impossible, particularly when they have the planning and backing of Western intelligence agencies, that if they happen to assassinate Putin, and that's a far what if scenario, well, God help Ukraine then, because no one else will, right? That will definitely be the end. I mean, the very name of Ukraine will be erased from the history books, right? After that. I mean, that there will be no Ukrainian, not only will there be no Ukrainian state, but there would be no Ukrainian nation after that.
I was sitting here thinking to myself, I was like, they should be praying and thanking God every day that Putin breathes, because whoever takes over after him, man, that seems like a horrible idea of ideas. I am curious about something else. Do you think these internecine dirty war, as they call it, I love the way we name these things as human beings, dirty war. Do you think that this is the ultimate objective? That all things being equal, Europe knows, or whatever Trump knows, Europe knows that Ukraine is toast. And part of the reason and rationale that they want to keep the war going is effectively to get Russia to forcibly take it entirely, even the West, with the idea that they can have these kind of this dirty war proceeding after. Meaning, if your objective is to bog Russia down for, let's say, a decade, ending it with some kind of deal is not the way to do that. Ending it. And give me your take on that first before I move on to something else.
So, I mean, this is unquestioned. And this has been reported on in the Western media, that before Russia's intervention in, the SMO was even launched in 2022, the U.S. was training for Ukrainian forces in the United States for a guerrilla war against Russia, right? Which is, what such a dirty war would inevitably be. So, I mean, that's not even a question. We know that this was definitely their plan B, and that they were preparing for it, even before Russia's supposedly unprovoked, active aggression, as they call it. The U.S. was already laying the groundwork. That is not a secret. That is open in the Western media. They discussed it, right? It came up as Russia. It came to public view after Russia's intervention, but it was, made clear in the reports that this started well before then. So they've been laying the groundworks for that for a long time. It also means that, let's say, a year, 2 years down the road, Russia takes Kiev, is forced to go all the way to a second government is set up somewhere in West Ukraine. Russia is then forced to go into West Ukraine another year. Let's say Russia reaches the Polish border. It doesn't stop then. It just means that the dirty war continues as a guerrilla war out of Europe, out of Poland, out of Romania, which is why I said back in February of 2022 that this is going to be a forever war, right? It doesn't always mean that it will be a hot war on the battlefield. There could be periods of frozen conflict. There could be guerrilla war. There could be the if you want to call this dirty war, there could be phases of hot war, but that there will never truly be peace again in Ukraine, for probably for the rest of our lives at a minimum. And that certainly looks like where everything is going. Hate to be the black pill Cassandra once again, but
you're fine. You're fine. I because otherwise I don't see what the point of it is to keep going. Like, it's obviously a loss. Ukraine is obviously
no. You stop thinking in binary terms. There is no winning or losing. There is a geopolitical game, right? Russia won the war on the battlefield in Syria and lost the peace a few years later.
This is not Syria.
They pulled it right out from under them, right?
Yeah, but this is not Syria.
That's far from the only example, right? They don't always think in terms of what does winning even mean. Does winning mean that Russia takes the Donbass and the Kherson and everyone signs a surrender paper and then there's like some type of Korean demise? Doesn't mean Russia goes up to the Dnieper River. Doesn't mean Russia takes Kiev. Doesn't mean that Russia goes to the Polish border. Does that then dovetail right in 5 years down the road to another Russian NATO conflict, which Europeans openly say that they are now preparing for, right? They're quite open about the necessity of rearming because we're going to be fighting Russia ourselves in 5 years, right? Obviously planning on that themselves. Yeah. So there isn't winning or losing because the terms of winning and losing are very amorphous in this regards, right? Everything is costs. Everything is bleeding Russia. The whole thing was launched with the knowledge. According to the Rand Corporation overextending Russia, it was to overextend Russia, right? To make them go into Ukraine and fight a war and possibly take over, being forced to take over large amounts of territory and Ukrainian populations, like even in West Ukraine, that don't even look favorably on Russians, say nothing of, East Ukrainians who would be more amenable to or favor, such a situation. But all of this to overextend, right? Again, this is not winning and losing. Is those terms are tossed around. Russia's winning, right? What does that mean? It doesn't necessarily mean anything 5 years from now.
I will answer that if you want me to.
Yeah, sure.
Look, this is chess logic, fair enough. And in chess logic, you win, lose, or draw. In the context of what Russia wanted, they wanted security for Russia. For all intents and purposes, we don't want.
They never get that. Russia never gets that. I'm going to tell you right now, that is a fantasy. Russia will never have security on its western border.
But there are levels of security that are more, let's say, favorable than others. And having Ukraine being taken over by NATO is a fail. That is like, honestly, if this war shows nothing else, and the notion and let's say Putin himself has even pointed out that
Yeah.
his response to this has been too slow.
Yes.
Meaning that is their objective. We need to stop Western expansion into NATO, where the Ukraine gets organized itself and instantiated into some kind of NATO framework, because it is far worse for us as opposed to going through the special military operation. Meaning they have to win that special military operation. I know you hate that word, but what that win means, fair enough, is very dodgy.
Yeah.
Agreed. Fair enough. But clearly, that's a better alternative than having Ukraine being taken over by NATO.
Yeah, I mean, and we're not even talking necessarily NATO membership, just NATO having de facto control over Ukraine and using its resources and population and territory, fashioning in an ideological anti-Russian Banderite regime that would, turn the whole population into proxies to fight Russia. I mean, that, yes. When this conflict first started, I was decidedly vocal against the idea that Russia would ever go as far as into West Ukraine. Now I see that as the least bad of bad options for Russia, because the alternative is so much worse, right? The creation of a NATO proxy anti-Russian warrior caste, of West Ukrainians, right? Maybe something like the Sikhs once became for the British Empire, right? That type of is something that is simply, in security terms, unacceptable. Now, does that open Russia up into a whole new host of problems, as the eternal security dilemma, right, of security studies always does? Yes, it does. But that's the rub. You never ever get, complete security. I mean, there are certain situations, but those are too horrible to ever contemplate. So that is, again, least bad of bad options. That's where Russia is.
Rand can write down whatever he wants. Writing something down is one thing. Doing it is different.
Yeah,
and
well, if you go down their shopping list, though, of how to overextend Russia, you can quite clearly see that every single one of those things has been acted on in the last decade. Every one of them.
I agree. I just don't buy the premise that Europe is going to be able to organize itself into a Russian fighting force.
That's enough. I agree with you. I think that Europe is a bunch of small yapping dogs, and with no cohesion, no organization. They can't, until they have a unified military-industrial complex. They themselves will never be a serious existential security threat to Russia. And behind it all has always been the U.S., right? The specter of the U.S. as part of NATO, setting up shop and driving everything, right? When the hegemon drives Europe, well, then you can get some things done, right? But still, even then, the U.S. has always done and will always do the heavy military, lifting in any such situation. And a perfect case example of that is Libya, right? Supposedly Libya, the U.S., Obama was going to stay out of that, and France and the UK were going to take care of everything, and they proved utterly incapable after months of even bringing down a third-rate, regime, in Libya, and in military terms at least. They actually had quite a good living standard and social benefits in Libya, but not anymore. And the U.S. had to step in, and NATO came with it, right? All of the bureaucratic and resource tools of an official NATO operation. And then they even had to go further, and Middle East countries like Qatar had to get involved on the ground to finally bring it to a conclusion. But yeah, I have another thing that has occurred over the last 3 years is I have lost all what little I had, respect, and lost all fear of a European military capability.
Yeah, yeah.